Story of the World, Volume 2, Chapter 8 The Great Dynasties of China. Part 1 Yang Jian Unites North and South. The Muslim Empire spread up from Arabia over towards the land that used to belong to Rome. It spread down to Egypt and North Africa. It became an enormous empire. But far to the east was an even bigger empire, the Empire of China. In ancient times, China had been ruled by one emperor, but over time, China had divided into two different countries, the North and the South. People in the North and the South didn't like each other. Southerners insisted that the Northern king wasn't a real king, only an impostor. And Northerners thought that people in the South were ignorant and crude. One Northerner wrote, "The South is hot and infested with bugs. People and animals live together like frogs and toads in the same hole. People in the South like the company of fish and turtles, but they don't know anything about art and music." Yang Jian was a general in the Northern Army. He thought that China should be one country again. So he led the soldiers of the North down to attack the Southern king and his army. The South fought back, but the Northern army was too strong to resist. Soon, Yang Jian controlled both North and South. In 581, Yang Jian became the new emperor of China. Yang Jian's rule over China was the beginning of a new dynasty. Do you remember what a dynasty is? It's one family that rules over a country for years and years. Yang Jian founded the Sui dynasty to rule over one united China. Yang Jian wanted to keep northern and southern China together, but he had a problem. In China, wide, deep rivers run from the west all the way over to the sea in the east. Travelers who wanted to go from the north down to the south had to cross the Yellow River. And anyone who wanted to go from the south up to the north had to cross the Yangtze River. I just want to add another note, guys. Yangtze is actually not a Chinese word. There's no basis for it in the Chinese language. The Chinese call the Yangtze River Changjiang, which means long river. Now let's get back to the read aloud. These rivers were hard to get across, especially in the spring when floods made them even wider and wilder. If people from the north and people from the south couldn't meet, talk to each other, and trade with each other, China might divide again. So when Yang Jian's son Yang Di became the next Sui emperor in the year 604, he decided to dig a new river, quote unquote, that ran from north to south between the Yellow and the Yangtze rivers. This new river, quote unquote, would be called the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal took years to dig by hand. Yang Di needed money to build it, so all of the families in China had to pay their taxes 10 years ahead of time. The emperors also forced millions of people to work on the canal. Every man between 15 and 50 had to spend months digging and building. And every family had to send one woman, one child, and one old man to work on the canal too. Finally, the canal was finished. The Emperor Yang Di decided to go for a ride on it to celebrate. He took his family and all the members of his court with him. It took 62 boats to hold them all. And since Yang Di didn't want to row, he forced workers to pull his boat with ropes. It took 80,000 men to pull all of those boats. The Grand Canal did make it easier for the people of China to go from south to north and back again. Now, merchants could sail up and down the canal with rice, pottery, and other goods. Some families even lived on boats. They ate and cooked and slept on boats. The mothers of these canal families tied bamboo life jackets onto their babies until they learned how to swim. But the Grand Canal also made the people of China angry with the emperors of the Sui. Many people died building the canal because they had to work hard without much food in cold and in damp all year long. Families had become poorer because men had been forced to build the canal instead of tending their farms and doing their own work. Everyone hated the extra taxes. And Yang Di didn't stop with the Grand Canal. He also built huge palaces for himself and his court, and ordered his people to work on making new roads and large ships that would help him to become more powerful. In all, Yang Di forced 8 million Chinese to work on his building projects. Finally, the Chinese people rebelled against Yang Di and killed him. Yang Di was the last real Sui emperor. His grandson, Gong Di, forced Gong Di to give up the title of emperor. After only 3 emperors, the Sui dynasty had ended. The Sui rulers had kept China together, but had lost their throne. After only 3 emperors, the Sui dynasty had ended. The Sui rulers had kept China together, but had lost their throne. Part 2. The Tang Dynasty. Yang Di, the last real Sui emperor, had treated the Chinese people like his slaves. He forced them to pay high taxes and to work on the Grand Canal and his palaces and roads without pay. The next king of China, Li Yuan, didn't make the same mistake. Li Yuan became emperor of China in the year 618. He knew that an emperor who rules hungry, unhappy people won't last for very long. He wanted the Chinese people to be prosperous and content, so he spent money on making cities stronger and cleaner. He decreed that the people of China could follow any religion they wanted to. He encouraged merchants in China to trade with the people of India and Byzantium. Li Yuan founded a new dynasty, the Tang Dynasty. The Sui dynasty only lasted for 40 years, but the Tang Dynasty lasted more than 300. Do you remember the Golden Age of India? The Indian Golden Age was a time when India was rich and at peace, and when the people of India created beautiful art, music, and stories. The 300 years of the Tang Dynasty were the Golden Age of China. The Chinese learned how to print books by carving the words into wooden blocks and dipping the blocks in ink. That way they could print the same pages over and over again, instead of writing each page out by hand. Chinese jewelers made beautiful, delicate jewelry with green jade, creamy pearls, and gold strands beaten so fine that they were no thicker than threads. Artists painted beautiful pictures on silks and sculpted graceful figures from pottery. They learned how to drain the sap from special trees called lacquer trees, color it black, red, gold, and green, and paint it onto wood and cloth. The lacquer dried into a hard, smooth surface, like a beautiful, medieval kind of plastic. The Chinese people became wealthier. Babies of rich people ate out of lacquer bowls with lacquer spoons. Many families were rich enough to eat fancy food, like ice cream made from rice and milk, and 24 different flavors of dumplings. In the early Middle Ages, most other people ate with their fingers, but the Chinese ate with carved and lacquered chopsticks. They dressed in silks, trimmed with jewels. The sleeves of men's coats were so wide that the tailors had to sew weights into the cuffs so that the sleeves wouldn't flap around and get in the way. And the richest woman of all wore skirts. Made out of the feathers of 100 different birds. Chinese scientists thought that China could become even richer if they could learn how to make gold. So they spent years combining different metals and chemicals, trying to figure out how to create gold. They never succeeded, but they made another discovery by mistake. When they mixed charcoal with 2 chemicals called saltpeter and sulfur, they ended up with a black powder that exploded. The Chinese had invented gunpowder. Soon, they learned how to use it in rockets made out of hollow bamboo tubes. No wonder that the Tang emperors became richer and more powerful. They built 4 long walls around their beautiful capital city, Xi'an. Each wall had 3 gates in it. Only the emperor could use the middle gate in each wall. The palace of the emperor had 20,000 musicians and entertainers living in it. One Tang emperor even brought 100 dancing horses to his court. The horses wore gold and silver halters and had jewels woven into their manes. When musicians played, the horses bent their legs up and down, nodded their heads in time to the music, and reared up and down. One Chinese writer tells us that after the emperor's reign was over, the dancing horses were sold to the army. One day, the soldiers decided to have a party out in the stables. When they started to play music, the horses began to dance. The soldiers were terrified. They thought that the horses were possessed by evil spirits and chased them out of the stable with brooms.